Air Transat pilots has issued a 72-hour strike notice.
Air Transat announced today it is suspending the last of its U.S. flights for the summer season.
With Canada-U.S. relations rapidly deteriorating since President Donald Trump took office for his second term, tensions have shown no signs of slowing down as Canadian travelers have increasingly boycotted travel to the U.S. in the past year.
The rules of the sky just changed, and most people didn't even notice. There was no emergency broadcast, no dramatic announcement, no political speech, just a quiet policy notice buried in technical language on a government website. The kind of document that normally gets ignored. But sometimes the most powerful decisions aren't loud, they're procedural. Let's ground this immediately, because clarity matters. There has been no confirmed shutdown of U.S. access to Canadian airspace, no official ban on American aircraft flying northern routes. What we're discussing is possibility. And possibility in trade relationships between deeply integrated economies is leverage. Now pause. Ask yourself something simple. When a plane flies from New York to Tokyo, does it travel straight across the map? No, it arcs north. It crosses over Canada. Why? Because the Earth is round. That route shortens distance. It reduces fuel burn. It lowers operational costs. It optimizes crew time and aircraft efficiency. For decades, that optimization has quietly saved airlines billions of dollars. Billions. And almost no passenger thinks about it while booking a ticket. That's retention spike number 1. Realization. Airlines operate on razor-thin margins. Add 30 minutes to a long-haul flight and costs rise immediately. Fuel consumption increases. Crew scheduling tightens. Maintenance windows shift. Insurance calculations adjust. Multiply that by hundreds of flights every single day. That's not political theater. That's operational math. And operational math eventually shows up in ticket prices and freight surcharges. Now let's keep this balanced. Canada and the United States share one of the most integrated economic relationships in the world. They share the longest undefended border on the planet. Energy flows south. Manufacturing flows both directions. Supply chains cross daily. No responsible government treats that relationship casually. But trade disputes between allies have happened before. Steel tariffs, aluminum disputes, lumber disagreements, pipeline debates, environmental regulations. When friction rises, governments look for leverage. Airspace and routing rules are part of that leverage, not because they are dramatic, but because they are structural. Retention spike number 2. If leverage increases cost on one side, the other side evaluates countermeasures. Sometimes those countermeasures are tariffs. Sometimes they are regulatory reviews. Sometimes they are adjustments to fees or access policies. They rarely come wrapped in headlines announcing retaliation. They come disguised as technical updates. Now let's address perspective, because this matters for bipartisan viewers. If you support aggressive trade policy, you may argue pressure forces better deals. History shows that economic leverage has been used across administrations to extract concessions. That argument is legitimate, but leverage is not free. It creates reaction, and reaction often affects industries that weren't the target of the original dispute. If you oppose aggressive trade tactics, it's also important not to exaggerate outcomes. Canada's economy depends heavily on access to U.S. markets. Major disruptions would affect Canadian exporters, airlines, and financial stability as well. Escalation hurts both sides. That's the complexity. Now let's zoom into the sector most directly connected to this conversation. Air freight. Air cargo moves high-value goods, electronics, pharmaceuticals, automotive components, time-sensitive manufacturing inputs. When routing becomes longer, fuel consumption increases. When fuel consumption increases, logistics companies adjust pricing structures. Fuel surcharges expand. Shipping timelines shift. Businesses absorb part of the increase. Consumers absorb part of the increase. It rarely appears as a dramatic jump. It appears as a small incremental rise. Retention spike number 3. Imagine paying $8 more for expedited shipping, or seeing airline ticket prices gradually trend upward over months. No press conference announces that adjustment as geopolitical impact. It just shows up quietly. That is how modern economic friction operates. Now consider competitive balance. If U.S. carriers face routing inefficiencies while foreign carriers operating under different bilateral agreements maintain optimized polar paths, even small differences can influence market share over time. Investors notice first. Airline stocks react to uncertainty before policy outcomes are confirmed. Risk premiums adjust. Forward guidance becomes cautious. That doesn't mean collapse, it means sensitivity. And markets hate uncertainty more than they hate conflict. Now let's talk leadership styles, carefully. President Trump's trade approach has historically emphasized visible pressure, tariffs, public negotiation, direct confrontation. Mark Carney's background in central banking reflects a different tool set: regulatory leverage, financial systems knowledge, institutional adjustments. Retention spike number 4. Different strategies, different leverage mechanisms. When those styles collide inside a trade dispute, escalation may not follow predictable political scripts. It may unfold through technical adjustments instead of speeches. But here's the bipartisan anchor. Neither country benefits from prolonged destabilization. The United States relies on Canadian energy imports, mineral supply chains, and cross-border manufacturing integration. Canada relies on U.S. consumer markets and capital access. Extended friction introduces measurable costs for both economies. So, what could realistically happen next? Scenario 1. Rapid de-escalation. Negotiators step behind closed doors. Adjustments are made quietly. Policy language softens. Markets stabilize. Most citizens barely register the turbulence. Scenario 2. Incremental friction. Regulatory reviews expand. Fees adjust modestly. Airlines recalibrate. Costs rise gradually over time. No single shock, just steady pressure. Scenario 3. Strategic renegotiation. Tension becomes leverage for broader trade restructuring. Short-term volatility. Long-term recalibration. None of these scenarios require panic. They require monitoring. Retention spike number 5. Bringing it home. If operational costs rise for airlines, someone absorbs those costs. Companies absorb part. Consumers absorb part. Investors absorb part. If cargo routes lengthen, inventory cycles tighten. Businesses adjust budgets, supply chains adapt. No headline declares it as a consequence of trade leverage. It appears in accounting reports. That's how interconnected systems translate policy into price. Now expand the lens even wider. Airspace isn't symbolic territory. It's infrastructure. It is embedded inside route planning software, fuel hedging contracts, aircraft leasing agreements, crew union scheduling, insurance modeling, change access conditions, and you change operational assumptions. And when assumptions shift, risk models update, insurance premiums adjust, freight contracts incorporate contingencies, capital flows respond cautiously. This is recalibration, not collapse. Retention spike number 6. Global allies and competitors watch these interactions closely. If close partners test leverage through infrastructure adjustments, it signals that economic tools are expanding in geopolitical strategy, not necessarily hostility, but experimentation. And precedent matters. If leverage works in one dispute, it may appear in others. That changes diplomatic norms. Now zoom back to the individual level. If tensions cool quickly, most economic effects disappear quietly. Markets rebound, routes return to baseline, consumers barely remember the moment. But if friction persists, incremental cost increases accumulate. That's the defining feature of modern trade disputes. They don't explode, they compound. They behave like pressure systems, gradual, measurable, persistent. And pressure eventually forces adjustment. So what should people actually watch? Not social media reactions, not dramatic headlines. Watch airline earnings calls, watch freight surcharge updates, watch regulatory filings, watch policy language, especially technical notices, because the most powerful economic shifts often hide inside bureaucratic detail. Retention spike final. The skies above North America are not empty space. They are economic arteries. When arteries experience pressure, even modest pressure, circulation adjusts. Not instantly, but inevitably. That adjustment might show up as slightly higher ticket prices, or slower shipping, or revised business forecasts, or new trade terms negotiated quietly. The story is not about personalities, it is about systems. Systems respond to incentives, systems respond to cost, systems respond to risk. They do not respond to political speeches alone. And in an interconnected continental economy, even subtle changes in routing policy or regulatory interpretation can ripple outward. That's not alarmism, that's structure, and structure shapes stability, prices, and prosperity, more than rhetoric ever will.